All right. All right. Today we're talking to Karan from the Expansion Project. We've been laughing off camera for about 7 minutes, but we're going to get serious and talk today. So, do me a favor and just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Mike, for having me. Mike and I actually met years ago, what feels like decades ago, honestly, when I first moved to a city where I knew nobody. So if you're somebody who like doesn't have a network or wants to increase your network, start hosting your own dinners. Stop going to networking events, start hosting your own dinners. So Mike and I actually met by me prospecting him on Instagram with a voice note saying, "Hey, you don't know me, but I host these entrepreneur dinners. You should come out to one." So just to set some context, like that's how I met Mike, and obviously our relationship has scaled on so many levels. I lived with the guy for 2 months in Mexico. Like we've got some history now. So my name is Curran, and for the last 5 years, I've been bringing people together really through the form of in-person dinners. These dinners have evolved into workshops and now retreats, and during the pandemic, Zoom events. And I just love a good conversation. And I feel like if you put enough people together in a room where you don't have to put on a mask. You don't have to pretend to be somebody you're not. You don't have to pretend like people are judging you based on your success, based on how much money you have, based on your business notoriety. Then you can have some pretty epic conversations. So, with that, I created what's now called the Expansion Project, which is a 2.5 day event, typically in Mexico, where I bring people together. We uncover their limiting beliefs, determine why they are the way they are, and really hammer home this message of 4,000 weeks, which is the average life expectancy in North America. And when you figure out where you're at in your journey of 4,000 weeks, it really puts things into perspective based on things that maybe aren't even important to you and the things that are really important to you that are maybe not getting the love, energy, and attention that they ought to be getting. So I love helping people who are on a ledge of some sort, who are looking to jump, whether it's start a business, leave a relationship, leave their industry. I love helping people like that jump because I too had to jump once and it was super scary. But I realized that you can't grow your wings while on the ledge. The wings grow as you're beginning to fall. So it's what I live and breathe, and I can't think of anything to me that's more meaningful in terms of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, that sounds very attractive, very appealing. I think there's a lot of people out there. I mean, I know, in my coaching, I talk to a lot of people who spend a lot of time comparing themselves to others, have a hard time, detaching from what I did in the past being me now. I mean, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that mental head game that goes into, especially when you're an entrepreneur, when it's like everything is like leaning on you and relying on you. And so, for the people that are in that boat that are listening, which I think are the majority of them, how do you gain that perspective? This 40, 44 week perspective. How do you take one through that process so someone could at least start thinking about, and finding out what they're maybe missing and what they're maybe not thinking about?
Yeah, so there's two things. So first of all, it's 4,000 weeks, right? So if the average
4,000 weeks.
life,
Sorry.
yeah, it's okay. The average life expectancy for a male in North America is 77. For a female, it's 81. Round those two numbers together. I just picked 80. Sounds cool. Nice round number. Everyone likes round numbers. It's about 4,000 weeks, just over 4,000 weeks. And just a note you said about comparison. So in this book, The Psychology of Money, there's a really cool story about how much is enough, right? We're always chasing for more, 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 and sometimes we don't even realize what more we're building for. So the story goes, there's a rookie MLB baseball player who gets like a 500K signing bonus when he gets drafted. Now he's comparing himself to the legend on the team who's making 100 million. He's comparing himself to the top lawyers on Wall Street that are making like 200 million. These Wall Street lawyers are comparing themselves to the top partners who are raking in like 300 million. They're comparing themselves to someone like LeBron James, who just got a $600 million contract. Now he might be comparing himself to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. So, like, what is this scale? Right? There's this scale of, and it's the problem with these scales is that they're self-imposed, they're self-inflicted, right? Because that's what people around us value. We tend to mimic the habits, behaviors, patterns, and even priorities of those around us. So when other people around us are valuing certain things, like the car you drive, the clothes you wear, the trips you do or don't go on, we start to feel like we're either less than or more than. And we feel like there's people behind us in life and there's people ahead of us in life. But again, it's just this scale that is like we are the creators of it. So I think we cause a lot of unnecessary suffering in that regard. And I've been in that category, and I'm sure you have, Mike. Like when we got into business, we had this elusive you got to hit 10K a month. Because if you don't hit 10K a month, man, you're a failure. And like, so you chase and chase and chase, and you finally have your first 10K month, and you feel on top of the world, and you're like, okay, maybe I can do this, right? Maybe I can do this. And then you set another target of 15K a month, and you hit it, and then 50K a month, and so forth. And it's, again, it's doable because, I mean, we do it, but the scale must be internal, right? It cannot be this external scale. So the basic premise of 4,000 weeks is, if you map out your life calendar, you have about 80 blocks, right? You have 10 years across in your row, 8 columns. So 80 years, you plop out where are you at in your life map. I'm 32 right now, turning 33. So my number of weeks was 4,000 from the day I was born.
Right.
The moment you turn 40 ish, now your 4,000 weeks is 2,000 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see this on a map and you plot out almost like little graves, how many years are already behind me and how many do I have left? If that doesn't put things in perspective, I don't know what will.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think as someone who has actually decided kind of when that timeline looks like for me, um, I'm constantly like making plans around and like thinking, and it's funny because even with that in mind, there's still days where I get halfway through the day and I'm like, what am I doing with this day? And so in the micro, it's sometimes hard and it's very easy to lose sight, but I think having some kind of visual representation I could see it being an extremely powerful tool.
And it's not something you need to look at every day. It's one of these concepts. Like we have a mentor. He's coached both of us. His name's Roland, and he said this thing to me that I've never forgotten, and I've kind of brought it into my own coaching. But he told me about this concept. He's like, once you see, you can't unsee. And I don't know where he got that from or what book. It doesn't matter. But like once you discover something about yourself, or once you have this aha moment, you can never unhear it. You can never unsee it. You can never like unsmell it, untouch it. It's like, so once I've discovered this idea that my time is ticking, and of course that makes obvious sense. Of course, all of our times are ticking. But once you embody an idea like that and it just becomes a part of you, it's like when I heard the words, if not now, when, I quit my 9 to 5 job. Right? It's not crazy transformative words, but it was enough for me in the moment to
Yep.
resign within 24 hours. The same thing when I heard the phrase, if you're not building your own dreams, you're building somebody else's. It's not transformative words, but I believe there's moments in time when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And sometimes it just takes a book or a podcast to completely change the trajectory of your life. And I think this idea of 4,000 weeks for me and for many of my clients and so forth, that has changed the direction they were headed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So someone maps it out. They've got some clarity and perspective on where they're at in theory in their life. What do we do with that information now? Where are we going?
Well, the default question that I think most people stumble on is when they're asked the question, well, what do you want? What do you want? Like, I don't know. I just want good income. I want to be able to travel. I want enough money to do the things and wake up whenever I want. But they're not really passionate about it. Like, they kind of know what they want, but like asking the direct question, what do you want, can be quite difficult to answer. But a question that's easier to answer with intense passion is, what do you not want? Right? Like, what don't you want your day to look like? What don't you want your schedule to look like? What types of people don't you want in your life? What types of clients do you want to just stop serving because they nitpick everything and they drain you, and they, for what you're getting paid, it's just not worth it. And we've all had, horror client stories like that. I definitely have. So instead of asking yourself, well, what do I want? Maybe you can start by asking yourself, well, what does the perfect day not look like?
Mm.
Right? What needs to happen in the run of a week for me to go, oh my God, this week was terrible? Like you just said, right? There was a period of a day, and I have days like this where at the end of the day, I'm like, what did I do today? Was I just like on Facebook all day, like doing nothing? Right? So like that to me is like, it's a bad day. Like I could have been out with my dog. I could have been calling my grandma. I could have been hiking. Like there's so many things I could have been doing. But I think once you determine what you don't want, I like to categorize my desires into three buckets: things that I want to be, things I want to do, and things I want to have. And I'm not a materialistic person whatsoever. I used to be, but an example of the things I want to be, you could say, well, actually, this is a great example. Mike wants to be fluent in Spanish, right? You literally just got off a Spanish lesson right before this call. So something that Mike wants to be is fluent in Spanish. So what do you want to be as the listener of this? Like, what do you want to be? Do you want to be an excellent cook? Do you want to be flexible again? Like, what do you want to be? The next thing would be, well, what do you want to be doing with your time? What do you want to do? Right? Do you want to visit the Eiffel Tower in Paris? Do you want to learn how to ride a motorcycle? Do you want to explore the pyramids of Mexico? What do you want to be doing with your time? And the next thing is having. And having could be, hey, I want to have a waterfront property in Miami, or I want the newest BMW 440i. Or you could say, well, I just want to have a personal assistant. So when you figure out what you definitely don't want your life to look like, I like to categorize desires into being, doing, and having.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good buckets. And I think, the most appealing concept in that for me is targeting the stuff that you don't want, because our brains always know what we don't like that like judgment or that distaste. Like it just, I think inherently as a human, those are the first things that we are able to identify, because we've either had an experience or we've experienced it in some way, even through somebody else, that you're, oh, I don't want that. But like, what do I want is such a big broad strokes, it's almost an impossible thing to just answer on its own. um Especially when you're thinking about, like, if you're thinking abundantly, it's very, very difficult. And one thing I'm like particularly struggling with is like, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm so jealous of you because you have the ability to travel anywhere in the world and work wherever you want. You're earning in US and paying in whatever currency you're in." And but the truth is, like, parts of me don't actually want that, because there's too many options. I have no idea where I want to be. I have no idea, like, what I know areas that I don't want to be, but that is a personal struggle that I'll share with you now. Is like, in theory, it's Mexico, because I love the country, and your dog's licking the microphone.
Hey, cutie.
um, but yeah, like, big picture, like, because I can do anything, be anywhere, it's like it almost becomes an impossible task to try and wrap my head around. So
Well, I mean, look at the majority of what you see on social media or even in podcasts, maybe not podcasting much, but social media for sure. You don't see people on Facebook and Instagram talking about all the things they want to do. In fact, the majority of the comments are negative, right? It's about how shitty life is, or about how the politics aren't working the way they are, or laws coming out, or it's always about like things that they don't appreciate about the world. So whether you think about the things you want or you think about things you don't want, you're still manifesting that into your reality. So saying, I wish I could lose weight is actually counterintuitive, because you're telling the universe, okay, well, help me gain weight. Saying, I don't want to be a smoker still makes you a smoker. You're still
mm.
inviting that energy and that vibration and that frequency in, even though you're saying the words, I don't want this. The way you frame it, the intentionality behind even just a simple statement like that, it's like when people say to me, like, I wish I could get clients. I'm like, wow, you've got a long battle ahead of you then.
So how would somebody then frame that for it to be more productive to their, I mean, obviously a lot of this sits inside of your subconscious as you're kind of going through your actions, your days, your weeks. I mean, that's sitting in the back of your mind, probably creating havoc, probably creating bad habits, probably creating procrastination. So how does one frame that to take advantage?
I think that conversation is happening 24/7 in our heads, even while we're sleeping. So instead of thinking about, and the simplest like grade 6 answer to this question is, stop thinking about what you don't want and just put that same energy into thinking what you do want. So saying like, I wish I could hit 5K or 10K or 50K a month, you're creating this gap of where you are now versus your ideal, which brings us back to the comparison game. Right? Anytime you say, I wish life will be better when that thing happens. And man, I used to tie my success to milestones all the time. Right? I'll be happier when I move cities. I'll be happier when I'm able to work from a laptop on a beach. I'll be happy when I, have really good consistent income. And there was for me at least, this future based milestone always tied, as if happiness is achieved as a check mark
Mhm.
when you hit a certain number, which is just ludicrous, but that's kind of what's glorified. That idea is glorified.
Yep.
So I spend my days extremely grateful for what I have. And Dan Kennedy, there's this book, Dan Sullivan. There's this book that I just started reading called The Gap. versus the gain or something like that. And essentially, the main concept is when we measure ourselves against how far we are from what we want, we create a gap. But when we measure ourselves with what we've already done and our past accomplishments and seeing how far we've come, that's when we measure the gain. And just subconsciously and psychologically, measuring the gain will always leave you in a better place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great point. Love that. So then we've kind of identified, we've now narrowed down some of the things that we want. What's the next step in the process?
Yeah, so this is what I call the SVA, the smallest viable action. Because the biggest mistake you can do when you determine you want to be something, have something, or do something, we tend to overestimate like what we can get done in a week or in 30 days, and we underestimate maybe what we can do in 6 months or even a year. So when most people have an idea of like, hey, I want to be fluent in Spanish, like let's use that example. Well, then they they sign up for lessons, they download Duolingo on their phone, they buy Rosetta Stone, they do something which is good, but then they hold themselves to some standard as if like they must be fluent in like the next 3 weeks, and if not, they're a failure. And the moment we decide we want something, like we want results quick. So if we measure ourselves against this unrealistic outcome, we're always going to fail. So what a smallest viable action looks like would be is so simple such that you can't fail. James Clear in Atomic Habits says if you want to start flossing, you start with one tooth. If you've never flossed for the last 5 years and you want to get into flossing, expecting you to floss your entire mouth is actually a really bad task for you. What you should do is just focus on the first tooth. Just like if you want to go to the gym, right? Maybe you just sign up. So the smallest viable action would look like for Spanish, the smallest viable action such that you cannot fail is maybe you download a language app on your phone. That's kind of the step you can take right now. So even the smallest viable action has 3 steps. What's the step you can take right now in this moment without any resistance or fear or hesitation or excuses? Step 2 is what can I do tomorrow? And step 3 is what can I do the day after? So what if the step now was download a language app on my phone? What if step 2 tomorrow was go through the first video in the lesson? And what if step 3 the day after was you say hi to your partner or your loved ones or your dad in the word that you learned?
Right.
Right? What if instead of saying hi dad, you said hola?
Hmm.
Like who's to say that's not you succeeding? Because you are ahead, but expecting then to have a conversation with somebody 3 days later with like paragraphs of Spanish, you're just setting up yourself for failure. So I think the smallest viable action is what can happen in this moment, meaning right now. If you pause the podcast, go do the thing, such as download the book or reach out to the contact or book a lesson. What's the smallest thing you can do such that there's no resistance? It's kind of like another concept is the lead domino, right? Again, we want to knock down these huge dominoes in terms of our goals and accomplishments, but they all start with the lead domino, which is that first thing.
Yeah. Love that. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think we've all taken on, and especially in business, like for me, I used to think about this whenever I started something new. I'm like, great, because I had written down what it could be in my mind, it was there. And so anything that wasn't that felt like I'm falling behind. And I think a lot of people have that feeling of like I'm behind, but I don't think often people ask, what are you behind? According to what? According to whose timeline? Why is that meaningful? Um, and I think that's often overlooked, especially when you're starting a business.
I did this I did this exercise a couple days ago because when you say like this concept of being like saying something on paper, I'll know I'm successful when,
Mm,
right? Which is kind of a negative actually. Like I know I'll be successful when, again, as if success has this check mark criteria. Like I know I'll be successful when I hit 10K. Who says you can't be successful at 5K, right? So
mhm,
it's this scale. Instead of asking yourself, I know I'll be successful when, what if you start to say, I'll know if I'm being successful based on what I'm being, right? Like I'm being successful when. So
mhm,
for me, I could say I'm being successful if my calendar only has meetings with hell yeah people. I'll know I'm being successful then. I know I'm being successful if I can live wherever I want in the world. Doesn't mean I have to.
Mm,
I know I'm being successful if me and my partner are co-creating our future together. Because if we're not, then that doesn't really feel like success to me. Right. So instead of, again, like there's this concept of like tying success to a future milestone, which is glorified. And I think that glorification is what creates misery
mm. Yeah.
because we're stacking ourselves up against somebody else's measure of success. There's this amazing story I heard yesterday about this woman in Iceland who's on a tour bus. And they're on this 8 hour tour bus. The bus stops at this very scenic destination. She gets off the bus and decides to change because she wants to go hiking. So she goes in the bathroom, she changes, she comes back, hours later, except everyone realizes that there's a missing woman. So they don't recognize her because she's now changed clothing. So they go up to the bus driver and they say, well, we can't leave yet. There's this Asian woman. She's got long hair and she's wearing dark clothes. And this woman had changed, so she didn't look like. So, but now, so everyone's growing concern of this woman who has not come back yet from this hike. The driver's like, well, we can't leave without her. They call this rescue party, the search party. The woman in question doesn't realize they're talking about her, so she joins the search party, and she's looking for this other woman with long hair, Asian, dark clothes. She just doesn't clue in. And only 6 hours later, at 3 a.m., they realize, oh, this is her. Like this was her the entire time. So why I'm sharing that story is sometimes we go searching for something because other people around us are just searching. So we're looking for answers. We're looking for something outside of us to tell us what do we desire? What do we want? What is our compass? What is our roadmap? What are our values? What are our intentions? And it's very easy to just be controlled by people around us to fall into the search party
Mhm.
of what life ought to look like.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny though? Like you're looking for yourself and you don't even notice it because hey, everyone else around you is still looking.
Yeah. Jeez. Uh, love it. So then, so then, um, I know there's a final piece here because it'll tie in because there's still. I love where we've gone, and I think a lot of this, even just the discovery of this, or even just becoming aware of some of this stuff, I think has a lot of power to it. But I know there's a fourth step, so I'd love you to take me through that as we wrap up.
Yeah, the fourth step, it's kind of like a combination lock, right? You have a combination lock with four numbers. The door doesn't open if you get three of them right. It's not how a lock works. You have to get all four combinations right. So step one was understanding and embodying 4,000 weeks. Step two was really around what do you want to be, do, and have. Step three is what is the smallest viable action you can take. And step four is what I call the Zor, this evil monster called the zone of resistance. And the zone of resistance is designed to help you stay safe, right? It's designed to help you feel like, hey, I'm safe, I'm comfortable already, I shouldn't do anything. Anytime you want to grow outside your comfort zone, your Zor is being tested. The old you is creating reasons and excuses as to why you can't have what you desire. The Zor is just created by our thoughts that creates a belief, that creates a reality. And when we ask and we try to identify, we're doing all the right actions, but our Zor is keeping us the way that we've been raised. And maybe the Zor is, again, the search party idea. Maybe our Zor is so controlled by other people searching for this thing that we feel like something is missing. The simplest way to identify your Zor is to write it down. And very, very simply, this is what Zor would look like. So let's say the thought again is I want to learn Spanish. So that's the thought.
Mhm.
Well, maybe your old belief is telling you, Mike, you're going to fail. Why on earth do you think you can learn a language? You can barely speak English. Who's to say you're going to learn this language? You're going to fail. You might as well quit before you start. And it's just all these negative things because again, we're really good at telling ourselves what we don't want, especially when we stack ourselves to some reality that we're measuring ourselves against. Whereas the new belief could be I'm excited to visit Mexico in 3 months, and I can't wait to order my coffee order in Spanish.
Mhm.
That would be so cool. So when you have this thought of like I'm going to fail for these reasons, the new belief system could be just tie yourself to a feeling that you can't wait to have in the future. Like
Mhm.
learning Spanish is fun, but I can see how it could get mundane. But if you know you have a trip coming to Mexico and you're staying in an area or in a city where maybe English is only 5 or 10% of their language and the rest is Spanish, well, how cool would it be to check into your Airbnb, go down to the local cafe, and say "Una americano, por favor,"
Mhm.
How cool would that be? You're going to feel like such a stud, such a boss being able to do that. So when you can tie yourself to a moment in time where the thing you're doing is you're going to be living it, you're going to be doing the action, then it's a quick way to combat these negative beliefs.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's
That's
really
it.
good. That's it. Awesome, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate you jumping on with me. We have to not wait so long between conversations because I love what you're working on. I know I've been through the evolution of different things that you've been building, been working on, working through, and this feels like the most you thing that I've experienced so far. So
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe it's because I stopped searching. I left that search party and I just created my own search party.
yeah.
And maybe that's the best description of this entire, like, what I've been able to do in the last, even just since January, rebranding, re-niching, like everything. And what, like, it feels so aligned to me, and I know you see it in me and how passionate I am about what I'm doing now versus even when I was, last year making really good money, but I wasn't really passionate about the thing.
Mhm.
Man, this is it's night and day difference when you discover, like, when you discover yourself, you discover your values, your compass, life just changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll link it all up in the show notes, but where can people find you if they want to hear more?
KaranNijhawan.com, and every 4 months we host a retreat around the world for people who are wanting to be more, live more, and do more, have more, but maybe are getting in their own way, and maybe they don't quite have that network, or maybe their search party has guided them to a wrong location in life. And if you need an opportunity to kind of recenter and rediscover who you are and what you want to do in your 4,000 weeks, the event is hands down an experience you should be at.
Awesome. Love that. Love you. Thanks for coming.
Love you, dude.